You know, when we look at our cities, these massive structures that shape our skylines, the bridges that connect our communities, we see strength, we see progress. But today, we're going to talk about what you can't see. We're pulling back the curtain on the hidden, corrosive problem of corruption that can hide inside these exact projects. So here's a little riddle for you. What do a brand new skyscraper and a secret handshake have in common? Well, it turns out a whole lot more than you'd think. That handshake, that little hidden deal, it can determine literally everything about that skyscraper, from how much it costs you and me as taxpayers to whether it can even stand up to a strong wind. All right, let's dive right in. To really get our heads around this issue, we've got to first define what these cracks in the foundation actually are. What do we even mean when we say construction corruption? I think this quote just nails it. Corruption is like termites. You can't see it from the outside, but it's silently, steadily eating away at the integrity of a project. It weakens the foundation of the building for sure, but it also weakens something much more important, our trust. Okay, first up, we've got the one we all think of, bribery. It's the classic quid pro quo. I'll give you this thing of value if you give me that contract. It's a pretty straightforward transaction, really, but it completely poisons the well of fair competition. Now, extortion, that flips the whole thing on its head. This isn't an offer, it's a demand. It's the inspector on site saying something like, "That's a nice project you got here. It'd be a real shame if a safety violation shut it down for 6 months. Here, you're not paying to get an advantage. You're paying just to survive." And then there's fraud, which is all about deception. It's just lying on paper to make illegal profits. We're talking about things like billing for materials that were never even delivered, creating ghost workers on the payroll, or faking documents to make a company look more qualified than it is. And finally, you have collusion. This is when the so-called competitors are actually working together in secret. They get in a room and decide beforehand who's going to submit the winning bid and at what massively inflated price. It basically turns a competitive marketplace into a total sham. So those are the main types of corruption we see. But that brings up a really big question. Why? Why is the construction industry specifically such a prime target for all this shady business? Let's look at the blueprint for how it all goes down. Well, it's kind of like a perfect storm. For one, almost every major construction project is a one-off, so it's super hard to say what it should cost. Then you have these incredibly complex supply chains with dozens of contractors and subcontractors, so many opportunities for backroom deals. Plus, so much of the most important work, the foundation, the wiring, it all gets covered up, literally hiding the evidence of any shortcuts. And with budgets in the hundreds of millions or even billions, skimming just a tiny percentage is a huge, huge payday. And you gotta understand, this isn't a one-and-done deal. Corruption can infect the entire life cycle of a project. It can start way back in the planning phase, when the project specs are rigged to favor a certain company, and it can carry on all the way through construction itself, with cheap materials getting swapped in and inspectors being paid to just look the other way. So, who are the players in this crooked game? It's usually a toxic mix. You've got some government officials who are willing to abuse their power. You have private contractors willing to pay bribes or rig bids. And then you often have project managers right there on the ground, the people who can either stop it or make sure it all runs smoothly. Now, it's really easy to hear all this and just think it's about money, greedy people stealing cash. But the real-world impact, the consequences go so much deeper than that. And honestly, they can be absolutely devastating. 30%. Just let that number sink in for a moment. Some studies estimate that up to a third of a public project's value can be siphoned off by corruption. Think about what that means. For every 2 schools we build, a third one vanishes into thin air. That's the real price we pay. Let me paint you a quick picture to make this crystal clear. Imagine a city is celebrating a beautiful new bridge. It's a point of pride, right? A marvel of engineering meant to connect people and boost the local economy. But here's the secret. Buried deep inside the project's finances, a deal was struck. A manager got a fat kickback to approve the use of cheaper, weaker steel for the most important support beams. From the outside, it looks perfect, but its bones are weak. And this is the inevitable result. Suddenly, the bridge is a safety hazard. It has to be closed. Supply chains are a mess, traffic is chaos, and it costs millions more in taxpayer money to fix it. But the worst part? The public's trust in the very people meant to protect them is completely shattered. This isn't just about money. It's about our safety and our faith in the system. Okay, that is a bleak picture. I get it. But it is not hopeless, not by a long shot. So the question becomes, how do we fight back? How do we start rebuilding not just our infrastructure, but our integrity? Let's talk about the path forward. The great news is we have tools that work. It all starts with transparency, letting the public actually see where the money is going. We need truly independent audits, the kind that are unannounced, to keep everyone honest. We absolutely have to protect the brave people, the whistleblowers, who risk everything to report wrongdoing. And we can even empower regular citizens to keep an eye on the projects happening in their own neighborhoods. Now, let's be realistic. This is a tough fight. We are going up against networks that have been in place for decades. Sometimes there's just no political will to change. And the corruption can even cross international borders, making it really hard to prosecute. So yeah, the challenges are real, but naming them is the first step to beating them. And for anyone who might still be on the fence, let's just push the moral argument aside for a second and talk about the cold, hard cash. Let's look at the economic bottom line and see why integrity really, really pays. The economic damage is just staggering. Foreign companies don't want to invest in places where they have to pay bribes. We've already seen how it makes projects cost way more than they should. And every dollar stolen is a dollar that can't be spent on schools, on hospitals, on things that actually help people. It is a massive drag on the entire economy. So when you boil it all down, fighting this isn't just a nice thing to do. It's not just a moral choice. It's an absolute economic necessity. It's one of the most important pillars you can have for building a strong, safe, and resilient society. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. Every single new project, every road, every school, every skyscraper, it represents a choice. It's a choice between doing things the old, broken way or building a future on a solid foundation of integrity. And the real question is, what role are you and what role am I going to play in demanding we make the right choice?